Welcome to the Escape News Podcast. I'm your host, Chad.
I'm your co-host, Ryan.
And today we have some grueling things for you, I guess, to some degree. And then also hippie. I don't know. At least in my mind.
Yeah, sure.
The second part of the show. That's what I always... Marijuana and drugs. Yes, we're talking about that. That's what I relate with hippies. So... but we're going to lead off this episode with MKUltra. And this is... Which, I mean, if you've been on the internet at all... I mean, you're going to come across CIA stuff, like we did in an episode a couple of times ago. Also, don't forget, it is Christmas. So this episode is going up on Christmas Day, and it's unlikely anybody's going to listen to it today. So Merry Christmas to those who do. And for the rest of you, I hope you're having a great day on whatever day you listen to this. So, getting back to MKUltra. So here's the short end of it. 1950s to 60s, the CIA was using drugs, electroshock therapy, and a bunch of other barbaric, torturous types of methods to create, in a way, a Manchurian candidate, a super soldier that they would be able to control completely, wipe this person down, base memories, and tell them something to do, a spy, some insurgent that they can put on the field, or take an enemy prisoner of war, insert information into their brain and send them back home to, wreak havoc, extract information, whatever it might be. So obviously once you're dealing with the brain and drugs and different things, you're getting into some dark fields. And what really kicked it off was the return from the Korean War. A lot of the prisoners were touting this communist propaganda and were criticizing the U.S. government. And what our agency here, the CIA and the government agency, thought was that they were being psychologically damaged and being tortured. And then this new information, this propaganda, was being pumped into our soldiers' minds so that they could wreak havoc in the U.S. and destabilize the U.S. or something like that. What also brought us to doing this project was we believed that Russia was doing it, and there's a lot of evidence to show that Russia was actually believed in, and our CIA government believed in psychic powers. The program that actually was revolving around the CIA trying to elicit and use psychic enabled abilities in people, that program ended in 95. So it wasn't that long ago that, our government was a bit crazy. And so actually the Russian government was heavily involved in believing in psychic powers and psychic abilities. And a lot of this had to do with knowing things before they happened, future predicting and stuff like that. So with all this going on, the Cold War, we knew that our enemies, Russia and the Soviets, whatever, were doing things to people, human experimentation. And so we thought we should be doing it too, so we could be on top of the game. And initially the idea was, the operation was called Operation Bluebird. And we were trying to figure out if our own agents could be compromised, if somebody could take our agents and brainwash them. And we wanted to figure that out. And then obviously it evolved into MKUltra, and it exploded into just crazy stuff. So some of the tests you read about earlier on are sarin tests, where soldiers would volunteer for what they thought was curing the common cold. But really it was a sarin, which is highly lethal. They would put it on your skin and test how much they could give people without actually killing them, which is highly unethical even if you're dealing with a volunteer, but you're not telling them, you're lying to them. So part of this, if you look this up, you're going to see Nuremberg trials where Nazi war crimes and things like that, we're telling these people hey, the Nazis did all this stuff, and we're legally in the whole world, people should not be doing tests on people that are unawares. You can't just do this on your population. You can't do this on people who aren't volunteering, and even volunteers, you have to tell them what you're doing. And we just didn't do that in this case. Shame on the U.S. bad to do that. As I said, this whole program was based around subservience to controlling authority. LSD was a huge possibility. Our government actually based around... So there was an idea that somebody didn't understand the difference between milligrams and kilograms and wrote a number wrong. So our government thought there were 100... Oh, what was it? It was some odd... It was a ridiculous, millions of doses of LSD were coming to the U.S., and our government decided to buy all of it. And really, there were only a few hundred doses, I guess, in the initial thing. But that is a segue into the U.S. government introduced to a large scale LSD to population in general. So I think that might tie into also like the cocaine being introduced into black communities, but we can talk about that another time.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
That one's dark and weird. If you want to know anything about it, go watch that movie, Zootopia. Just kidding. I guess that in some degree might be about that.
Yeah.
So
there's
a lot
some
of
songs written by it too. About it.
So there's a lot of information out there about it. Which we might have to cover at some point. But going back to this, like LSD was prevalent like use. It took them a very long time to figure out that LSD makes people less subservient to authority and just messes them up, basically. But there were some other trials that the Army did and knew this right away, that this just wouldn't work. But the CIA decided to, prolong the tests in various other ways. So they would keep people asleep for 30 or 40 days at a time. They put tape recorders in helmets and high electric shocks and all kinds of stuff too. So they'd be testing on like prisoners, volunteers, at some points the public in general. It was pretty crazy, the stuff that they would do, where they were using prostitutes at times to bring in guys, and they would like have one-way mirrors where they could see what was going on and try to get information out of these people, giving them drugs and different things. And basically their tests only concluded that they're more likely to like get information out of people after they had sex or something. So they were finding that like drugs didn't really help them very much in this case. So really big one is Sub-Project 68 of the MKUltra project. So we know that there's about 149 sub-projects of MKUltra, and about 6 of them tested on victims that didn't know that they were being tested on. But one of the big ones is 68, and this was in Canada. So Canada plays a really big role in this, in that we decided that, I don't know exactly what happened, but we decided that testing here and people knowing about it wasn't a good thing, and we should do it in other countries. So the U.S. government set up a bunch of front organizations and to make it sound like we started giving grants or like memorials and foundations and things like that. We were getting involved in all kinds of science places. One of the big ones is the Allen Memorial Institute. It's on Montreal in Montreal in Quebec. And I'll talk a little bit about my connections to actually like some of the stuff here in the Afterburner. So you have to stick around for the Afterburner. You can hear about some of that story. I actually have like family and relations to some of the, not like the actual incidents going on here, but like some of the other places in that area. So one of the big guys up there was at the Allen Memorial Institute, and his name was Dr. Donald Ewen, E-W-E-N, Ewen Cameron. And his big thing was like psychic driving. So him and a lot of the other people who were involved didn't know that our government was giving money and doing all of these tests. Like they didn't know that it was our government doing this. But it wasn't until 1974, after Watergate and everything like that, the U.S. government decided that they would get rid of MKUltra. They decided it was bad, and they're going to destroy a bunch of the documents and then release some of the information and end the project. But there was a bunch of information that was mislabeled and just remained around and came to public knowledge about the MKUltra program. This leads to a conspiracy theory that is actually a cover story for ongoing tests that the CIA still continues to do today. So that's a big conspiracy theory, and there's connections there that might actually be a possibility, that our government does all kinds of weird things to people, and that the whole government destroying the documents and releasing some information was actually to drive people away, and releasing information, like basically mishandling information, saying, oh no, we didn't mean to release that information, is to like say, we did all these bad things and we're not doing it anymore, but we actually are. So I don't know, that could go either way. But
wasn't the JFK assassination stuff, I think President Trump had released it or something like that, and like there were references to Martin Luther King, and so that people were saying like, hey, this is kind of the same thing, like you guys are hiding stuff in completely different files so that FOIA requests can't uncover them, because you don't know what to ask for. Like you're going to make a FOIA request to the U.S. government saying, hey, how much did you pay for pens in this particular region of the world? And then you find out in there's like all this crazy stuff they're doing. Like, are they doing stuff like that? So, but they can always come back and say, it's a clerical error. We didn't mean to put it there. So I don't know. But yeah, I think there's something similar. There was references to the Martin Luther King murder, I think. Then the FBI was alleged to be involved in that somehow.
I mean, that's definitely possible. Weird. Because when I was looking through like the Operation Mockingbird, like looking at an actual document that was released from the government it's just like scanned in, and there's just tons of information and notes and things all over it. Like it's just really somewhat difficult to read through. I felt like.
Yeah, but and then they had some other issues. Like this is kind of funny, but what they'll do is they'll scan these things in, and then they'll do the redactions over top of the original text, but the original text is still there because of the way I think PDFs do things by layers. And so there were people like just I want to say they're just opening up a PDF in like Photoshop, and they're just like, boop, let's just remove the layer of the redactions, and there it is. And so yeah, it's kind of a mess.
Oh wow, I didn't know about that. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, I think it was Photoshop. I remember I saw like a video of someone doing it. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. But anyways.
I mean, it's definitely, that's the way it works. I mean, it's really easy to get rid of stuff if you're not doing it right. Like,
yeah, but there's a way of doing it where you collapse it all into like a final layer, and you lose that information underneath the redaction.
Yeah, you need to flatten the image in Photoshop or export it as a JPEG or something like that, or a PNG.
And they weren't doing that, or something was wrong. It would retain that stuff. So
that guy probably lost his job.
Yeah, I'd say so.
So that's like the majority of like MKUltra. That's not the majority of it, I guess. There's a lot of other things that happened. Those are some of the highlights and the big things. So the gist of it was, especially in Canada, a lot of people not knowing that they were actually doing work for the government. And in the US, that was going on. The CIA put in a big front with the overall goal of trying to create sleeper agents and controlling memory. And especially you can read about the reports in Canada that when they were doing these de-patterning, basically they were trying to like wipe people down on their memory. People would go all the way back to being children who weren't even potty trained. Like that's how bad they could make it for somebody, wipe them out to that point, and then they're basically inhibited for life because they're already an adult and they have to relearn all this stuff. They're all messed up. So there's a ton of that that happened. So all of the people like it took a very long time. Like I was watching the reports, and a lot of the guys back in the 70s and the 80s who were lawyers and stuff like that for the victims were even saying that like the Canadian government is dragging its feet. The U.S. government doesn't want to admit anything like this, and we don't even know if we're going to see settlements in our lifetime. Definitely not in our victims' lifetime. And it was more recent. I think it was the victims. Most of the victims who were de-patterned, to basically taken down, like all the way to that, had to sign non-disclosure agreements, and then they received like $100,000. But that was like in Canada. I don't really know about the trials or anything that happened in the U.S. But people who were touched by this program generally came out pretty messed up. It's pretty crazy. Or I mean, if you take the money, you're not allowed to talk about it, which kind of stinks because then the government just like can continue to do what it does. But I don't even know that if somebody didn't take the money and they did talk about it and revealed it, if anything would actually change. Because like you look at like Edward Snowden, did anything really change? Does the NSA do anything differently? I mean, I don't think so. I think they're probably just listening just as much. I mean, if not,
Google how would you know?
So exactly,
how would you know if they stopped? You have no clue. It's like, we're doing it, but you don't know if we're still doing it. I don't know, and it just muddied the water.
Yeah, exactly. So, all this drug use lends itself to what I actually found that this LSD thing was actually a large contributor to the movement of what became like the hippies and the revolution and the sexual revolution, all that stuff that happened. And you can take it away with marijuana becoming legalized.
So right now marijuana is still technically illegal in many states, and it is technically legal in just a handful of states, about 15 to date. I had to check up on the current status of it.
Mostly out west, right?
I think so. So like, so there's a couple different levels. There's like 4. So there's there's where it's fully legalized and sales are ongoing, like they're currently going on. That's in Alaska, California, Colorado, Illinois, Maine, Massachusetts, Michigan, Nevada, Oregon, Washington. So yeah, a lot of it's out west, couple here on the East Coast. And then there's ones where they have semi-recently legalized it, but they have not, sales have not really started. I know there was a bit of a hiccup when, like, I think Colorado, when they first legalized, I think they were among the first to legalize it, then Washington, I don't remember. When they first legalized it, it was not dispensaries, but the shops that were selling marijuana at this point, they had to collect in cash because banks would not allow them to open an account to receive money that had been, because like it was still illegal at a federal level. It was just legal on a state level. So I guess you go to like a credit union, a local type bank or something, but a lot of places were just doing like, cash. And I don't know what they were doing with it after that. So there's a bit of an issue there. Honestly, I don't know what they're doing with it now. But so there's places where it is currently legal, but the sales haven't really started yet. Because I think a lot of times they'll legalize it, and then there's like, well, in about a year or two, then we'll start allowing for the sale of it and stuff like that. So there's some lag there with some of the states. There's about 5 that have legalized it, but sales haven't really gotten off the ground. So about 15, you could say, are totally legal. And they're kind of in a flux in terms of like, mass sales and shops being open. And there are about 21 states that allow it, but only in a medicinal context. And then there are 14 states where it's absolutely illegal, no medical, no nothing. It's just illegal.
Wow.
And now there's a little bit of a gray area here because the CBD or cannabinoid oil is not illegal, and so it's kind of this gray area, and that's being sold in places, and as far as I know, hasn't been curtailed or stomped out. I didn't really look too much into that, but just just throw it out there. So it's interesting because we're talking like the early 1900s, first decade or so, the 1900s. Like hemp was a huge deal. Like it was so common, it was encouraged and incentivized, really big deal. They considered hemp, so just so you know, marijuana and hemp are the same thing. The plant is a hemp plant, or the marijuana plant is this hemp plant. It was considered, they even coined the term, not coined the term, but they called it a wonder plant. The plant is like, well, because it's super hardy. Like, so the drug side of the thing was actually a very small aspect of the plant. The plant is very hardy. It can grow in almost any soil. It doesn't need nearly as many pesticides to preserve it. It, like I said, grows in almost any soil, so it's very easy to grow. And there are a ton of uses for it. So like the seeds themselves are like one of the top 10, top 5 plant seeds that have the highest concentration of protein. So like if you're looking like, so this is something where it's like really condensed or really compact delivery system for protein. This is something that they were targeting as like, we could actually put a dent in world hunger with this kind of thing.
So it's like the new bean.
Yeah, because like you can grow it almost anywhere. It's super easy to grow. It grows really quick, like really, really quick. And the seeds can be used, as like, it can be, I think it made as a food stuff that can really help, you can deliver the stuff to, or mass produce it and then get it out there. Because you can produce it in the regions that you need it. And then you can quickly process it. And then, you have like these like high energy or high protein food stuffs that you can deliver to people in like starving areas.
Wow. So that part of it though is that part of it at all like have the effects of like the leaves or anything? There's trace amounts of THC in this. I think most of the THC is in the leaf itself within the fibers. The seeds contain a fatty acid that's good for cholesterol. It's like it just keeps going. What made it really good in the U.S. Was its manufacturing possibilities. So they used to make a lot of hemp rope out of it. That was one aspect of it. But one of the big things is that
It's super easy to process marijuana, or in this case hemp. It's very easy to process. It costs next to nothing. There's a lot of caustic chemicals that go into processing other alternatives like wood fiber. When you're making paper or any kind of paper products, there's a lot of chemicals involved to break the wood pulp down and to press out these things. You don't have that with hemp. So and then from if you're looking anything that requires wood fibers, hemp is a far superior wood fiber alternative. It's actually the primary. Wood fiber is actually technically the alternative to hemp. Hemp takes primacy over that. And the other big thing is biodegradable plastics can be processed out of hemp. So
wow.
yeah. So so the thing is apparently the U.S. actually incentivized people almost to a point of requirement. If you have arable land, you need to be growing hemp because they had so many uses. Like I said, a lot of it's for manufacturing. You could how we have just wood products to make housings for different electronics or whatever, at the time anyway. So TVs and sofas, all this kind of stuff. Hemp could be used to make all that stuff, and it was super easy to grow, grew really quick, high quality, easy to process, environmentally friendly, all this stuff. It was incredible, and that's why they were really big on this. Well, this all happened within the course of several years to a decade. And this was very much a death knell to a lot of the big, I want to say families that were they had their wealth, the very wealthy families in the U.S. A lot of their wealth was tied at the time to cotton and cotton products. And so hemp basically came out of nowhere and just eclipsed all of that. And so I think Henry Ford was really on board with it, and a bunch of other people were too. But there were several people who hey, we're going to lose our livelihoods. We were, this rich elite family in the U.S., and we could very well be completely broke in a generation because we can't, reposition ourselves. It's happening too quick. So enter Andrew Mellon. He was a very wealthy industrialist at the time. He kind of came out of nowhere with some of this stuff, kind of got into politics, or at least into the government somehow. And he became head of this newly formed, drug wing of the federal government, they're supposed to identify dangerous substances and deal with that. So this guy kind of leverages some nepotism. He gets his niece's son to work in this subdivision, and that guy goes to work to basically figure out how are we going to kill the hemp industry, because he was heavily invested in DuPont paint at the time, and then some of the cotton stuff, and so he was trying to get rid of hemp. Hemp was a huge liability, a huge risk to his family's future and his wealth and all this kind of stuff, and he had other people that were also sympathetic to that as well. So the way they went about basically making this illegal was they rebranded hemp. They coined this term marijuana, and they spelled it. Let me see if I can find it. Marihuana, which is it's an anglicized version of the Spanish term. They have a J in it, marijuana. But anyways, they made this term. And so what they did was they started talking about this drug called marijuana, and they started talking about how it had this violent effect on people. People who smoked this drug, they would become violent criminals, and they started instilling all this fear and drumming up and fear mongering all this stuff. And so they had gotten a lot of their newspapers and media to kind of broadcast this stuff and get all this misinformation about it out. And so they had created this bogeyman about marijuana. Well, what they didn't tell anyone was that marijuana was hemp. And that was the point. Because people knew what hemp was, and they didn't know what marijuana was. All they knew is that marijuana was this evil, evil thing. And, they had no opinion really about hemp except it was a positive thing. But so Mellon and his proxies had essentially rebranded hemp as marijuana and made it out to be this really terrible, terrible thing. So then they started pushing this through Congress. That was their next thing. We got to get this, put into the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act. And so they started going through committees, and it was during committees that they realized that marijuana was hemp. Well, like by then it was too late. The ball had already been rolling. They got it through Congress. People were like, "We hate marijuana. Marijuana's bad. We're all going to die if marijuana's not made illegal." And then it became illegal.
Wow.
And so
they didn't actually make what we know as marijuana illegal. They just made it's really weird, because it's two different things you're almost talking about here. Like you're talking about like product stuff, and you're talking about like drugs. And
they had they kind of hid the connection, right? So if you think about like you're trying to give your dog some kind of heart medicine, you wrap it in ham or something like that. That's essentially what they did. Ham was marijuana, and the heart medicine was this hemp. So they got through, and now all of a sudden people found themselves like, oh, now hemp is illegal. Like, what happened? But because of how effective the media blitz was and how they framed everything, they got to go through. And even to this day, people still think that hemp is this horrid thing. And it's crazy how this has been a multi-generational thing. And part of that was because like the parents of the baby boomers, had almost just implicitly trusted media and passed that on to their kids. And so then it's kind of this place where people don't always process what they're reading in the media, and like are they trying to mislead me? Is this propaganda? They don't think about that often. It's getting a little better now, but they just don't. It doesn't process. But it was because of all that they were able to get this stuff rebranded and viewed as being this horrible thing. And and really the fallout from all this, which is super unfortunate, is like hemp is honestly a really great thing. I think a lot of the focus is on the drug side, the recreational drug side of hemp, which certainly exists. But there's a ton of other uses for it that would, I don't know, it eclipses all the cons, if you want to call it that. Because honestly, I mean, like, marijuana causes people to kind of slow down and get hungry and be lethargic and stuff. I mean, if we're talking about like the negative sides of drugs, like this would be one with the least amount of negatives. And beyond that, I mean, it's non-habit forming. It's not nearly as bad for you as cigarettes are, and cigarettes are legal. And honestly, alcohol is you're essentially drinking poison, right?
I tell people that all the time about alcohol. Like they're all like, oh well, because I mean nowadays like drinking is like all the rage, as it's always been, but I feel like it's more acceptable for almost everywhere. Like you see all those little breweries and things everywhere. And besides like killing your liver, I feel like you're going down a very dangerous path with alcohol because there's a
dependency issues.
Dependency issue, but like more often than not, like I felt like people do stupid things or violent things a lot of times when you're drunk and stuff. But I just don't read a lot of stuff in reports where like somebody was high driving and like ran over a bunch of children or something like I don't know, like I see completely different stories.
But I mean, we already have laws in place where you can't be under the influence of anything, even a prescription drug, and operate a motor vehicle. And a lot of times, like, people that are high aren't leaving their house. They're not even leaving their couch. They're just going to sit there. They're going to eat Doritos and just veg out for hours. If they were to get behind a car, they'd probably just sit behind the wheel and stare at the garage door for 5 hours. Like
see, that's what I picture of it. Like, it doesn't seem as it's like more innocuous. Like, it's not that dangerous. I'm generally against people like using drugs because you're putting yourself under the influence of something. I just don't recommend that. But like I feel like people should be more upset about alcohol than they should be about marijuana.
Well, I mean, you can overdose on alcohol. I mean, alcohol poisoning is a thing. Like people die because they drank too much, and like you can't physically smoke enough marijuana to kill yourself. Like, it's not physically possible. It's why they denature like cooking wine. Well, I shouldn't say denature. I mean, so in cooking wines, minors can buy a cooking wine off of the shelf because
they add salt to it.
It's full of salt, right? If you tried to get drunk off of cooking wine, your body would violently reject everything because of just the salt content. That's why it's safe to do that. And then the whole act of denaturing alcohol for like cleaning products, same idea. They make it so like you cannot physically drink this and get drunk. Marijuana, naturally, you can't smoke enough to get to OD on it or whatever. Like, it's not going to happen. So like
I guess that would be a thing. Huh.
And at the very least, I think the medical side of stuff I thought was really crazy. I'll just take one example because a lot of people use it for like kind of pain management kind of stuff, which it does serve, and it does a decent job of it, I suppose. I mean, I'm not really up on all the details on how effective is it and what are the alternatives, but one thing I saw, which I haven't really seen an alternative for people, is people who suffer from Parkinson's. This was a really crazy thing I saw. So if you don't know what Parkinson's is, it's like this neurodegenerative type disease where, so a popular person that has is Michael J. Fox. If you've seen some of his stuff, like basically your hands shake uncontrollably and parts of you start shaking uncontrollably. And it's not like tremors. Like I'm putting my hand up here. You can kind of like, there's not like something like this. Like we're talking like their hands are violently shaking to the point where they can't even feed themselves or do much else. It's really terrible to see that happen. And so I saw this video where this guy had, an advanced stage of Parkinson's, could not physically feed himself, terrible quality of life as a result. So then they show on the camera, and they don't slow it down, or they don't speed it up the camera, or speed it up to, kind of take out the time, because it's about 5 to 7 minutes after he had taken like a single hit of like a joint of just marijuana. The THC that he was putting into his body caused everything to even out. So like within 5 to 7 minutes, this guy's like rapidly shaking hands just kind of slowed down, and it became like completely calm. So he's like showing the camera, his hands like perfectly still. There's like very slight tremors, but nothing near what he had before. And so the guy is talking like, I basically in the morning, I wake up, I smoke part of a joint, and that gave him like an hour and a half, 2 hours, I think, of the normalcy of life. And then he would smoke more of it later and just kind of throughout the day, like a little bit at a time throughout the day. And he was able to lead a semi-normal life. Wow. And so I was like, well, that's really interesting. And I had saw some other instances of that. So it wasn't like just this guy. I mean, it's kind of a thing that's known, at least within the medical community, that, marijuana is, this is something that it absolutely does, or at least the THC does. I don't know if there's a high enough concentration of THC in CBD oil, and I don't even know if THC is the reason that this is. I mean, there's a bunch of other stuff, cannabinoid oils, there's a lot of them, so there's a lot of different chemicals in them that are naturally produced by the hemp plant. I don't know which combination of those is actually what's causing the tremors in Parkinson's sufferers to, have that relief. So that's why I'm not sure if CBD oil can be used in as a replacement for simply smoking. At the very least, like, it's very easy. You can just get these plants, dry them out, roll them up, smoke them, and that's it. And you can grow this stuff in your backyard, and get some tissue paper. I don't know how to make these things. So all that to say, like, there are certainly very easy medical benefits to this kind of stuff, and it's definitely something that I think deserves to be studied more. And so by making it illegal, you actually prevent a lot of researchers from discovering additional uses for marijuana or for hemp. And I think we've really kind of hamstrung ourselves as a country by allowing it to be made illegal. And so while personally, from a spiritual, personal standpoint, I can't condone the recreational use of drugs. That's more of a personal thing. From a political standpoint, I'm more libertarian, and so I'm all about liberty. So like, if that's something people want to do, that's fine, as long as I'm not being forced to do it, and I don't want to force my beliefs on other people. So it's a whole other discussion, but. So I'm not necessarily against the legalization of marijuana, especially if it comes to the point where, like, there are a lot of medical benefits and a lot of other benefits from this. I just don't think we should be making it illegal, especially not criminalizing people for possession of it and ruining their lives, which that's a whole other topic too. So,
which, I mean, that definitely, like everything you've said, like I've known some of those things, but I feel like the majority of the information does shift my perspective more in favor of like, really, like maybe it should be legal for, especially for those medical reasons, because like when you look at it, I mean, who doesn't take aspirin? Who doesn't take Dayquil or NyQuil? Or who doesn't take like all kinds of like, there's tons of drugs that I know people are very familiar with and take frequently and have no problem with that. And, or ibuprofen or whatever. And like it may not be to the effect that marijuana has, but it's still a drug. You're still using it, and you're using it to whatever cure, whatever ailment or thing. And I think what you're saying, it is to some degree, there's like a miracle with it, like in the base, like part of the plant has a lot of uses in the seeds and stuff. And then also the medical. So it does seem like like they used to say a miracle drug or a miracle plant, like can do all the things. So, I mean, to some degree it does sound like that. So,
yeah. And the other unfortunate thing also is that because researchers for the longest time have not been able to study it, we don't actually know the long-term effects. Now, maybe there aren't any. Maybe there are. I mean, maybe I'm sure there's something, but we don't know that. And now people are now, or it's sort of legalized, sort of not in many places. And so now a lot of people are going to start, adopting marijuana use. And maybe we find out in 20 years, like, oh, it would have been better if people had always, taken marijuana in this other form, because now everyone's got some other kind of weird cancer because they've been doing it. But if it hadn't been made illegal, maybe we would have discovered this and it could have prevented it. So it's just kind of upsetting. So I'm hesitant to say it, but I mean, honestly, I think I feel like I am in favor of it in some ways. But yeah, I just feel like
while you were talking, I was like, I put up a video in the background just so I could like see what I looked up, what you were talking about, like Parkinson's disease and marijuana. And it is just unbelievable to watch like somebody who's like completely shaking and volatile, because I've seen these people. I know people like this who have some like their hand tremors or their whole body shakes or something like that, and they give him to it, and it's like within 5 to 10 minutes, like suddenly he's like back to normal, and he's even saying like, wow, I can talk again and I have control of things and stuff. This is nice. And it's like, wow, to like make that life for some people that I even know like would be, I mean, it's annoying that they have to use that to be able to do that and not just have a normal life. But at the same time, if we can provide it for them, like, I mean, that sounds like a good venue to go. So,
yeah, I mean, if just smoking it gets you that result, I mean, maybe if we had research around it, maybe we could find like, oh, well, actually, you can take this like half tablet in the morning, another half tablet in the afternoon, and you're good the rest of the day, or something like that. Like we don't know because no one's allowed to study it, and it's just kind of it's unfortunate, but
that's what happens when you have big corporations and political gains and things like that. Old money. Yeah. people doing things, which, I mean, I can't say like anybody would do anything different in the case of like if your family's fortune is going out the window and you're going to find some way to like politically move things. Like I think most people would do that. Like obviously if you're if you're saying you aren't going to do that, it's like, well, you're not in that place to have done it. It's just like there's a movie that I was watching where Overboard or something like that, where like the guy's in the water, he's falling off the ship, and like he's choosing between like the girl of his dreams and his father, who's like, I'm not going to give you any money if you go pick her and stuff. And she's like, why are you hesitating? He's like, it's love or money, like you obviously pick love. And he's like, but nobody actually gets to choose, and like you don't know how hard of a decision is when you're in it. And it's like, that's very true of a lot of like, most of us don't have to deal with like a family inheritance or tons of money or like making big decisions like this or trying to like whatever, like so I don't want to fault them either, because I understand like you're just trying to do, like, not that you're trying to like do in the whole country, you didn't really probably know that at that point, like you're just trying to protect your family's money.
Right. And I it's hard, like I don't know Andrew Mellon's like state of mind, like maybe he didn't know or didn't trust all the positive stuff about hemp at the time. He just saw it as like, here's a threat, and my easiest way forward, instead of restructuring my entire wealth assets and all this kind of stuff, I should just I can just go this political route and bam, done. Because it only took him a handful of years to do it, and it may have taken him a lot longer to readjust. I mean, he knew cotton, and he knew whatever else he was involved in, to have to kind of retrain yourself into something else. And so I don't like what he did, for sure, but like you said, I mean, that was the decision he made at the time. He felt like that maybe he just didn't know what hemp could have been, and he just kind of did this thing and, didn't realize what it was going to do. So,
and if it wasn't for him, we might all be wearing hemp t-shirts and jeans and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if they make that stuff out of it, but
I think you can actually. Well,
wow,
I don't know.
It really is the miracle plant.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I got for this. So I guess we'll see you guys over on the Afterburner. Like, comment, subscribe on the video, and we'll see you over on Rumble if you want to check out the show afterwards. And let's get out of here.
All right. See ya.